Hello, shalom, everybody. This is Dr. Monzo here again. So we want, or at least I wanted, but everyone here at Wellbeing by Design, we thought it would be a good idea to make a short video on the matrix. That's right. Okay. So now you're seeing me and the PowerPoint. And oh, let me just pull all these in because this teaching is really going to be more on the matrix part of things, not so much the weaponized pathogens, which we have a lot of teachings on weaponized pathogens, but I just wanted to mention this because it goes into this concept. What are they again? They were genetically engineered pathogens in which technology and toxins are all mixed together. These were invented in the 40s. Big point here by the Nazis. And everyone knows my opinion on this since I'm one of the main people who talk about this subject, is that this was demonic technology that was given to the Nazis. So a weaponized pathogen is half machine and half pathogen, very advanced. That's what you need to know. For all the other stuff you need to know on these things, just a reminder, Nazi Germany, we recruited a lot of the Nazis. It was called Project Paperclip. That's why this technology went global, if that's a word. Okay. And it's during the 40s, demonic technology. So the best way to really think of these things are they are nanotech pathogens because they're half machine, half pathogen. There's all your exposures because everyone asks, well, how do I get exposed to these things? Well, if you live and breathe, you've been exposed. Vaccines, injections, ticks, spiders, mosquitoes, aerosol spray, the GMO foods. Okay. Now, a lot of this other stuff also started in the 40s. We're going to talk about a lot with the 40s. Real quickly, the Armed Force Institute of Pathology. These are the different conditions right here. Get my laser pen. That they created by creating WMFI, which was one of the first weaponized pathogens they created with the Nazis. Okay. This information is kind of difficult to find, but when you can find it, you will see. In other words, all the diseases we never used to get until the 40s, right here. Now, most people who know me have heard me talk about this subject, and we have a whole hour, maybe hour and a half teaching on this subject, and it's worth your time. But we have found another aspect of how this stuff has been working in your body. And if you don't remember, I used to talk about how these things, this technology has to steal energy from us to power itself. Well, welcome to the Matrix. What was the movie The Matrix about? You know, they hide this stuff in the movies. Well, you're going to know after this. So I just wanted to say all that to preference what we're about to talk about with the Matrix. The Matrix. So if you haven't seen the movie The Matrix, there's a guy named Neo, and he meets this guy Morpheus, and he gives him the red or blue pill. And if you take the red pill, you go down the rabbit hole. And if you take the blue pill, you get to go home and forget that you learned anything. And he takes the red pill and he goes down the rabbit hole. And he wakes to find this, that humans are grown in this field. You can see the field. Look at the colors. Look at the colors. Okay. People are grown in this field, and the machines are growing humans. There was a war between the machines and the humans, and the machines won. And part of the Matrix is that the machines are keeping people in this virtual reality world. They don't know they're awake, or they think they're awake. They don't know they're asleep in a virtual world. Meanwhile, they're being grown in this field, and they're being turned into energy. And he holds up a copper top. This is a mitochondria. The colors kind of look the same. Yeah, the mitochondria. You know what the mitochondria is? It is the powerhouse of the cell. It's basically a huge power grid. Now, I took a little liberty drawing these lines here to make this look like a power grid because some of the latest photography or imaging, you could call it, of the mitochondria now shows that it has these things that look like a power grid. So I kind of drew those little lines on there to represent what we are now seeing in the newest pictures of the mitochondria. It's literally a power grid. Now, you see this blue gel lake in here? That's called the matrix. That's right. And what do you need for the body to make this ATP? ATP is the energy of the cell. Well, you need a couple things. You need iron, copper, retinol. You need the ceruloplasmin, which is right here. This is a protein enzyme. You need magnesium. And now magnesium gets attached to ATP and it becomes what we call magnesium ATP. A number of things to point out here. The big thing is this. In order to make the ATP energy, what you really need is this copper and iron to be connected. When copper and iron are connected, and I forgot to put one thing in here, oxygen. When copper and iron are connected with oxygen, they produce light water. And if you understand the Aleph Tav body I talk about, you understand that more. That's more like a plasma, which becomes ATP energy. ATP then has to get attached to magnesium, and it becomes magnesium ATP. Your body doesn't use it if magnesium's not attached to it. How does the copper and the iron get bound together? The ceruloplasmin, which is a protein and an enzyme. Now, I picked these colors very specifically, and this is actually a picture of a ceruloplasma in color. Isn't it interesting? The copper and the iron, blue and red pill, matrix. The machines are turning us into batteries, and they hold up a copper top. Yes, copper in the body is blue, iron is red. Why the retinol? Retinol, if you don't know, is vitamin A from animal source. The stuff that's called beta carotene that you get from plants ain't going to work. This is really important because this is what loads the copper into the ceruloplasma, which is why the ceruloplasma has all these colors, all 5 colors, right? You got blue, you got yellow, orange, and if you know Aleph Tav body, my main research, then you know this is first cycle, second cycle, third cycle is green, fourth cycle is blue, fifth cycle is red. All 5 of the physical cycles present in the ceruloplasma. The retinol is what's responsible for loading the copper in there so that the copper can be bound to the iron. And when that process happens, you end up with ATP energy. If you have magnesium, you end up with magnesium ATP. Now there's one problem. This is not taught in modern medicine anymore, and I think it started not being taught around the 40s. Well, you know what else happened in the 40s? They started adding fortified iron to the food supply. That's called iron shavings, or in other words, synthetic iron. Okay. They also started using pesticides in farming, and pesticides strip your copper. Copper, especially glyphosate, copper, gone. In the medical community, they started teaching copper's toxic nonsense, and everyone is low in iron or anemic. Maybe not everyone, but most people. Nonsense. And retinol, which is a animal source vitamin A, and you need animal source clean animals, biblically clean animals. The EPA of the clean animals is needed, which is 3.43 hertz, is needed for the retinol to be active and to load the copper in here. So the other big thing, they started teaching, not quite in the 40s, but a little bit later, it's been taught for a long time now in America, is low-fat diets and no animal food products. That is going to get you completely copper depleted. But what happens is the copper has to be bioavailable. This is how you have bioavailable copper. The process of the retinol loading the copper into the ceruloplasmin so it can be delivered to the iron or bound to the iron. That is the process. So these two things right here, that's the process of bioavailable copper. Okay. This is probably the most powerful antioxidant in the body, the ceruloplasmin, which you have probably never heard of. Okay. And a lot of this is all covered in Morley Robinson's book, Cure, which is right there on my bookshelf. And you notice the book cover is purple because when copper and iron combine, they become purple. You see the purple in here? You see purple in the Matrix movie, blue and purple, and a little bit of red because blue and red make purple. You don't think the movie Matrix was actually talking about the matrix in our cell that's responsible for making energy, which is exactly what the machines were stealing. Now, wait a minute. What else did they make in the 40s when they were changing the food supply? Oh, nanotech pathogens. Guess what they steal? Copper, retinol, magnesium. They live off of iron because they are half pathogen. Pathogens live off of high iron. All pathogens. What else depletes copper? Fear and anxiety. Fear and anxiety is the emotion controlled by fourth cycle. Fourth cycle is blue. Coincidence? I don't think so. Stress depletes your magnesium, completely wipes it out. So stress is going to completely wipe out magnesium. So when they can get you in a constant state of stress, fear, anxiety, you're not going to have any ATP energy. And if you don't have any ATP energy, not much in the body is going to work. Now, if you don't have copper being bound to the iron, it is now called unbound iron. And that unbound iron is going to get stuck in the cells, inside the cell, or in the tissues, because tissues are made out of cells. Okay, so if you do a blood test, guess what they are not going to see? They're not going to see any iron because it's not in the blood. It's stuck inside the cell. And why is it stuck inside the cell? Because it's not bound with minerals that it needs, like copper, to be really bioavailable. So instead of it going in and out of the cell and cycling, like iron is supposed to cycle in the body, it's going to get stuck all nice into different cells and tissues. And wherever it's getting stuck, you're going to get oxidative stress and inflammation. That's right. The number one cause for mitochondrial oxidative stress and cellular inflammation is the unbound iron sitting inside the cell or inside the tissue with oxygen. Iron and oxygen, when they're left together, start rusting. Biological rust is called oxidative stress, and that is the number one cause of inflammation in the body. Now let's think about this, what they've been doing to us since the 40s. Synthetic iron in our food, synthetic D, everyone's high dose D, most D. First, D is not a vitamin, and most of the D out there is synthetic. High dose D, synthetic D, is going to strip your body of retinol, which means you can't use your copper, which means your iron is going to get stuck in the cell, oxidate, and create more inflammation. Synthetic D is a steroid hormone. All D is a steroid hormone. Normal D is made by the body. Okay. Then you have all these other synthetic minerals and health products today that aren't really much better than pharmaceutical drugs because they're synthetic supplements, completely depleting your copper. And how many things in the body are really copper dependent? It turns out all kinds of things. Okay, all kinds of things. A lot of your genes, methylation, your B9, your B12, thyroid function, iron, obviously, magnesium. There's most enzymes in the body copper dependent. There's no way copper is toxic. There's way too many functions that are dependent on copper. Okay, that's why they started decreasing it in the 40s. Why? Because there's only one way to hide this nanotechnology that's inside the body that they started making in the 40s. And there are specific genes that I talk about in that presentation on weaponized pathogens and nanotechnology, like the light control genes that had to be turned off. This is a process of light. This is a process of cellular respiration, aerobic respiration. You don't want anaerobic respiration. That's when this process isn't working right. Okay. And then you get into burning sugar and stuff, and you don't want any of that. I'm not going to get into that. This isn't a science course on all that. This is about the matrix. So I covered that in those presentations. Those light control genes get turned off because they're epigenetic genes. Epigenetic genes just mean genes that can be turned on and off. We have a lot of them. The majority of your genes can be turned on and off. There's only a small amount of genes that are actually written in stone. Okay. Now, how does that happen? The process of oxidative stress, which is unbound iron combining with oxygen and rusting, that oxidative stress begins the process of epigenetics. This is how they start turning off genes. And if you didn't realize it, since the 40s, they have been messing with our iron with magnetism. The latest insult on us is 5G. And 5G also helps to, what it does is it interferes with how the copper and the iron are getting inside the gates to the cells. So the copper doesn't get in, and it causes a major problem with the iron in the hemoglobin specifically to reduce your oxygen carrying rate. And it affects the copper because copper is the oxygen activator. And then what that does is it causes all that iron to go deep into the cell and the tissue again, where it's not bound, it's unbound, and it has all that oxygen, and then it creates more oxidative stress to specifically, and somehow they're doing this with the specific frequencies with the 5G to then turn off methylation genes. I saw a significant problem with methylation genes ever since March 2020. You remember when they locked down the whole world and started releasing 5G everywhere? Yeah. Now, there have been many times throughout history when they've found different ways to mess with iron with magnetism, mainly to control cells. Does that make you think of the jab? Yeah, you should. Okay, so this is what's going on. Now, one more thing we really need to talk about with this is this idea of the mitochondria. And in most books, you have this concept that there's one mitochondria per cell. Well, that's not necessarily true. There's actually an average of 500 mitochondria per cell. Now, some cells have a lot more, like the brain and the heart is like up to 10,000 per cell. The liver and the kidneys can be anywhere between, I think, 3,000 to 6,000 per cell. I don't have all these memorized still. Each cell is going to be a little bit different, but obviously it's very logical to think that anything that requires immense amount of power is going to need more mitochondria per cell to make more energy. So the brain needs a lot of energy. It's hugely electrical. The heart, again. Now, the most in the body is the female egg, which has up to 600,000 mitochondria, because this process of the copper and the iron mixing together with the oxygen to produce light, water, then ATP, that first reaction is a spark of light. And that's exactly what happens at conception. And an immense amount of energy is required at conception. which means if someone controls the copper and iron and the lies around them, they control fertility, brain function, autism. You ever notice how these are problems that are on the rise? Remember that list I showed you of all the things the Armed Forces Institute actually admitted they created with nanotechnology? Why? The other perspective on this is because nanotechnology is crashing your cellular matrix, which is in the mitochondria. Okay? They're stealing your copper. They're eating up your retinol. They're stealing your magnesium. And then the other forces at work, fear, anxiety, stress, everything's going to kill you. You're not going to have a job. Everything's going to crash. I mean, everywhere you look, the boogeyman's in your bed. Wars and rumors of wars. It's nonstop fear, stress, anxiety to completely deplete your copper and magnesium even more. Why? So they can make more oxidative stress, so they can turn off more of your genes, so they can sneak the stuff into your body, which lives off of your nutrients that further creates more oxidative stress, so that they can turn you into a battery and pretty much create diseases. So you're stuck in their system of spending tons of money on fake drugs that do nothing, probably than other than to tell these nanobots, nanopathogens, to stop attacking you. And then they turn off part of their software system. They turn on a new part of their software system and they attack you a different way and you get new symptoms and you need another drug. The whole thing's a gimmick. They're creating all the diseases. And the other reason they're doing this is because their end goal is transhumanism. Remember, who gave the Nazis this technology? The demons. And what they do is they create this whole dynamic of creating diseases by getting nanotechnology pathogens in your body to live off your mitochondria, to live off the matrix, to create and put you into a matrix of lies that teaches the whole medical system a lie about copper and a lie about iron. And the blood tests don't work because they're not testing how much iron is in your cell. They don't know how much iron is oxidating. They don't really test your copper. They really don't understand the ceruloplasma much. They don't understand the importance of retinol and fat in the diet. They don't understand the importance of magnesium. And even in the holistic health food or the holistic health field, there's all kinds of synthetic supplements that deplete all this. And now you can see the problem. What does the brain need to function? It needs copper and it needs fat from animal source. And it needs retinol. That's what the brain lives off of. And what have we been getting for years? Low fat, no animal products, no copper in the diet, tons of pesticides, completely depleting the copper out of your brain. And we wonder why brains don't work anymore. We wonder why everyone has these methylation problems and why most autistic kids are born copper deficient. Oh, you know what else the copper does? It protects the myelin sheath. That's right. That's the coating on your nerves. What do we use in our wires? Copper. Copper is very electrical. Iron is very magnetic. The copper and the iron together is what makes electromagnetism. One of the things that helps electromagnetism in the body. And the fat is an insulation, right? That's what you need fat for. So when you have tons of inflammation, guess what your body starts making? Cholesterol. It's a protector. Now you go to the doctors and they go, oh, we have to get that cholesterol down. How about you just kill the person slowly with your witchcraft? That's exactly what they're doing. Okay, this is the matrix in which we live in. What's the other big thing today? Autoimmunity. Autoimmunity. Yeah, and what do they say for all autoimmune disease? Oxidative stress, inflammation. What's causing it? We don't know. Okay, you know it's oxidative stress, you know it's inflammation, but you don't know what's causing it. That's because they don't know this. They don't know this because they're not even woke up yet. They're still in the matrix world thinking that copper's toxic. Everyone needs more iron. Fat's not good for you. Oh, and supplements, they don't work. So why would you take magnesium? Why would you eat whole food? Just go eat McDonald's. You need drugs. There is no such thing as a drug deficiency. There's a mineral deficiency. And then they started making that nanotech. And isn't it interesting that all this stuff all happened in the 40s? It's more than a coincidence, folks. Now, one other thing. What about thyroid? Because a lot of people will show up with thyroid problems today. T3, T4, thyroid. I actually call it the canary now. It's a canary because the T4 and T3 in the thyroid, its main function is to be an oxygen sensor. It's supposed to tell you when your body is under oxidative stress. And when it's under oxidative stress, it sends a message to the liver. Liver is third cycle, green, in the Aleph Tav body system. Fifth cycle is red, and is iron. And it sends a message to the ceruloplasma. And what's interesting with the ceruloplasmin, the ceruloplasmin itself is a yellow-orange, which is first and second cycle. And then it works with retinol, which is green, to load copper into the cell to bind it with the iron. That's why you have all the colors in the ceruloplasma, which is the 5 cycles of the Aleph Tav body system. So the T3, T4, which are the thyroid hormones, send a message to your liver to make more ceruloplasma. I say it, it's hard to say it right. Ceruloplasmin, I know, I can read. But when you talk fast, you say it wrong. And why is the body making that? To get more copper into the cell to bind up the iron. Why? So the iron stops making oxidative stress. So the thyroid is a canary. When people start having thyroid problems and their energy is crashing and their hair is falling out and they're gaining weight and they're having heart palpitations and all these things, those are all clear signs of too much synthetic D. Why? Because the synthetic D depletes your retinol, so the copper doesn't get loaded into the ceruloplasmin, and then that means unbound iron, which means oxidative and inflammation. Although they do a very good job hiding the inflammation because synthetic D is a steroid hormone. And what do steroids do? They mask inflammation, they make you feel great, but they're not doing anything for you. They're just prolonging the problems. And as soon as you get off that synthetic stuff, normally the first thing that happens, all kinds of inflammation comes out of nowhere. And a lot of times your immune system kicks into gear because synthetic D turns your immune system off. And all of a sudden you find out you have infections in your body you didn't know. Why? Because high iron attracts pathogens. And you're going to have high iron, unbound iron in your body when you don't have the retinol that the D is decreasing. This is a perfect plan from the enemy. You can understand everything that's been going on since the 1940s right here. Why is there an increase? Why are we the most unhealthy country now in the world? Most of modern medicine came about after the 40s. Even the first 2 pharmaceutical companies in our country came directly, they were working with the Nazis. They started at the same time. So I can't say they came from Nazi Germany to here, but basically they were working both sides. They were here and working with the Nazis, but because they were Nazis. The first 2 pharmaceutical companies in this country directly related to what was going on in the 40s. Basically, the whole medical field, modern medicine, is directly related. I know a lot of doctors don't want to hear that, but you have to learn your history of how modern medicine started in this country. So they started teaching wrong. They started changing the food supply. They were making these weaponized nanotechnology pathogens. And all of it does the exact same thing to the body. Destroy your copper, make unbound iron, increase your unbound iron, and a lot of it's synthetic. No retinol, no fat, no animal. Vegan diet. Worst diet I've ever seen. Most unhealthy people I've ever seen in my practice in 20 years. Vegan. And trust me, folks, a real issue with the mitochondria can take years to develop. Some people, it's right away because they just crash. Other people who eating a somewhat normal diet, if that exists in America, and then they get into the vegan diet, you can be sustained for quite a while, but eventually you're going to crash because this function's not going to be working. And it's not going to get better until you get this process working, which is going to include animal products. Cod liver oil, phenomenal. Beef liver, beef organs, phenomenal. You're going to need magnesium. And we want whole food. That's the whole purpose of this. We want whole food. Now, if you really want to learn more about that, you can see Morley Robbins' book, Cure, or you can go to the RCP, the Root Cause Protocol website, and learn more about this. Now, I don't know how much he knows about weaponized pathogens, nanotechnology, and how this actually relates to the movie The Matrix, but he knows all about the chemical part, because that's how I learned. And when I was reading his stuff, I went, oh my goodness, this goes hand in hand with the weaponized pathogens. And now I know why it's so hard to get rid of these things, because we have to fix the mitochondria to get rid of the weaponized stuff, or they're going to keep coming back. Gut. Gut is a huge, the small intestine mainly, but some of the large intestine reabsorbs iron, and it only does that with copper. So there's a copper deficiency, you're going to have a lot of problems with the microbiome for two reasons. One, because of reabsorption of iron, and two, if there's tons of iron in the gut with no copper, you're also going to attract more parasites into the gut, and they love messing up the gut. Okay, so that is the cellular mitochondria. The only other thing to say is the senses. You have the 5 senses and 5 cycles of life manifestation. That's part of the Aleph Tav body, for those who don't know what I'm talking about. The 5 cycles of the body. There's 5 physical senses that they make up. Third cycle is the eyes, sight, retinol. Can't be making that up. Hearing is copper. That's 4th cycle. 5th cycle is touch. First cycle is smell. Second cycle, yeah, that's right, is taste. Now, a lot of your senses start going bad when there's a copper deficiency. So that's another sign that your retinol or copper are low when you start having different problems with the 5 senses. So if you know you have a thyroid problem, you can almost guarantee you have a mitochondria problem, because it's really dependent on that copper. If you have gut problems, probably going to come back to this. Autoimmune problems, it's going to come back to this. You have inflammation in the body, going to come back to this. You have oxidative stress in the body, going to come back to this. Brain problems, come back to this. Heart problems, come back to this. Most likely, if you have a problem, we're probably going to find something on this chart somewhere that's not working right. You can even be low in oxygen, kind of hard, but it's possible not to have enough oxygen inside the cell. But we're going to be looking at oxygen. We're going to be looking at iron. We're going to be looking at retinol. We're going to be looking at copper. We're going to be looking at magnesium. We're going to be looking at the ceruloplasmin. We're going to be looking at if these different parts of these are synthetic. We're going to be looking at if they're organic or inorganic. And I hope this really helps you to get a better understanding of what the matrix really is and what's been going on since the 40s to affect your health. So we're going to close with that. The last thing I'm going to say is, remember, if you look at the root cause protocol, there are stops and starts. You don't want to do all the starts at one time. You should start the stops. And basically, to summarize the stops, in one sentence, eat a whole food diet and stop taking synthetic vitamins. If you do that, you basically got the root cause protocol stops down, okay? Because the stops are the things you need to stop, because if you continue doing them, you're going to deplete these vital minerals in your body. Now, most of the time, if you have been tested by me, I'm going to attach that to your chart, or we're going to give you a handout on that. The starts are very simple. We need to get minerals, trace minerals back into your drinking water. You might need to get on something called the adrenal cocktail. You might need more magnesium. Most likely, almost everyone needs more magnesium because stress absolutely destroys your magnesium. So anytime you're under a lot of stress, you need more magnesium. You might need cod liver oil or some type of beef organs or beef liver, because that's where you're going to have your most retinol and bioavailable copper. A lot of that is going to be dependent on our testing, because everyone's a little bit different. So we're going to test you to see which ones your body can tolerate and which ones you can't, and where you need to start. And everyone on this chart is going to be a little bit different where you are, what's high, what's low. So that's why we pick out the supplements that we do for you. I hope this was informative to you, and I will see you